And now, the best 60-ish seconds of your week. And as we swing into fall, there's lots to talk about this week. We'll start with the Republican presidential debate held Wednesday night at the Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California. And bluntly, it was a bit of a disappointment. The big winner, in my judgment, was the man who wasn't on stage, Donald Trump, who went to a United Auto Workers meeting and made his case there for populism at its core, appealing to union members for their support and getting a lot of it. And on stage, it was one of those things where the appearance was that too many of those candidates had been overcoached. I've done a lot of debate prep for presidential candidates in my day, and I can tell you what was being said before they got there to virtually every one of them. Interrupt others in order to get your point across, grab as much time as you can get, and look for the minute where you can deliver your snarky little gotcha line. And that seemed to be all of it. The substance really kind of washed away. And so for many of those candidates, their opportunity to shine was diminished. And that is unfortunate. So hopefully in the next debate, they'll find their cues again, get off of the, fancy pants stuff that consultants will give them, and talk to the American people about the issues that affect them every single day, and there are a lot of them. Meantime, the House Republicans launched their impeachment inquiry, and the key word there is inquiry. This is not the way that Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats handled the impeachment of Donald Trump, where they rushed to judgment and rushed to get an impeachment vote put onto the floor. Rather, there were not fact witnesses this week, so the testimony wasn't quite as spicy, no smoking guns or anything of that sort, but rather expert witnesses laying the foundation for further inquiry. And we all know and believe that when that further inquiry is done, there are going to be mountains of evidence against Joe Biden and the corruption that centers around him and his family. And on the judicial side this week, we saw what happened to President Trump, where a judge in New York found summary judgment for the Attorney General there in a civil, underlined civil, fraud case. Now, you've got to remember that this is the same Attorney General who yucked it up just a couple of years ago out on the campaign trail about how she was going to get Donald Trump. Ha ha, we'll sue him, he'll know me by name, etc. Is this the justice system that we have in America today? I think everyone, Democrat, Republican, Independent, Conservative, Liberal, has to ask themselves that question, because what's happening in New York is really frightening. This Attorney General has put forth a case on the civil side that prosecutors chose not to do anything with on the criminal side. And the questions that occur are twofold. One, who was damaged? And secondly, where were the underwriters of the various loans on which Trump allegedly made fraudulent statements of the worth of the assets that he was putting up as collateral? I mean, they're supposed to do their due diligence. They're supposed to go through all sorts of machinations to determine the creditworthiness of any potential borrower. So a lot of questions there, and we'll have to see what happens on appeal, because the underlying case there by the judge's motion has already been decided. And Senator Bob Menendez pleads not guilty to the federal charges against him. An awful lot of Democrats, including Republicans, calling for him to resign. But that call for resignation may now not have quite the juice that it did just a couple of days ago, because of the sad death of Dianne Feinstein, who passed away at age 90. That means that if Menendez were to resign, there would be 2 vacancies in the Senate, and control of the Senate, at least temporarily, up for grabs. Obviously, the governors of both of those very, very blue and progressive states would appoint replacements that could be worse than Feinstein in particular. So we'll have to see what happens there, but the pressure gets off of Menendez just a little bit for a time being. And also in the Senate this week, they come up with a dress code, and John Fetterman has to get a new haberdasher. We unfortunately deal in this silliness, but Schumer made it an issue. It backfired in front of him in major ways, because traditionalists like myself, but also just ordinary folks, believe that there ought to be some sense of decorum in the greatest deliberative body in the world, because the world is watching. And my former boss, Ronald Reagan, wouldn't walk into the Oval Office without a suit on. Think about that when you consider what John Fetterman and others thought was a good idea to wear onto the Senate floor. And back here in my native Pennsylvania, looting in Philadelphia, made reference to by Nikki Haley in the debate the other night, again giving rise to what happens when you have these Soros-supported, soft-on-crime district attorneys. You had earlier in the week a Philadelphia police officer having charges brought by that district attorney dismissed, but whether or not the charges against these looters will be prosecuted by the district attorney is another story altogether. And as a result, Philadelphia has been reduced to a really sad place to go to. And an awful lot of the fault is at the feet of Larry Krasner, and bluntly, most of the rest is at the foot of Mayor Jim Kenney. But there is good news coming out of Philadelphia because Red October is here. The Phillies clinched their playoff position and then the same night clinched the top wild card spot on a single by Johan Rojas. Now my favorite Philly, a guy who has really come out of the blue, wasn't even in the roster at the beginning of the season, but has performed admirably in center field and at the plate. They win the wild card spot, top spot, to take the home field advantage against the number 2 wild card holder this week. And who shows up at the game the other night but a fan with his pet alligator, his emotional support animal, and the Phillies wouldn't let him in the ballpark. I mean, imagine that. Philadelphia doesn't let a live alligator into the game. And for now, that is the best 60-ish seconds of your week.